Cloudia Planning is a tool where the organization can plan ahead of the forthcoming tenders and the procurement, so that we will have always the overall look of what's going on in the organization. We can do different tendering proposals in the system. We can then further or let's say proceed further and do the drafts based on those original proposals, and then in the end we can create the actual tendering projects based on the earlier proposals or drafts. It doesn't mean that you have to always follow the same path. You can either create directly the draft or create directly the project. You don't have to always go through this channel from proposal to draft and the project. The tool itself works as an independent tool, but of course if it's integrated into Cloudia Sourcing, we can then create the actual sourcing projects based on the projects created here in the tendering phase, and vice versa. So if we have done a procurement project or the project in Cloudia Sourcing, we can then withdraw that information back to the planning and start to plan and create a new project or the draft based on the earlier done procurement, which was done by Cloudia Sourcing. This big picture here in the front page, that gives you an overall view of what's going on in the organization. So here in the left side column under the tenders header, we have different projects or the drafts ongoing in the system. These light blue bars here, they present tendering drafts. There is a rough estimate of the timing schedule based on the original proposal or the draft. And then these bars where we have different colors, they represent existing tendering projects in the system. Where we have with different colors highlighted the previous finished phase, ongoing or the current phase, and then the next phase in the project. We can also filter this view either by the let's say on the organizational level or the user level. So whoever is managing this big picture of the planning can always filter the shown information based on these criteria, what we can let's say filter on this front page. I will now next go through these proposal, draft and project phases, show you a little bit more about what is the content of each and every phase here, and then in the end I will also show you in practice that, for example, here in the project where we can create certain timelines for different kind of tendering projects, that how that scheduling takes place and how you can utilize and maximize the usage of Cloudia Planning tool. Actually, before going to that, I could also show you that we can then, if we talk about the proposals, we can release the link for the organization's internal intranet page, for example, where the persons in the organization can input their forthcoming needs of different goods and services. So you can create, anybody in the organization who gets the link can fill in the proposal information, the name of the coming proposal, the proposer's name, email address, things like that, and send this information to the person who actually manages this sourcing tool here. And by collecting that information from within the organization, we can then create the big picture of the coming needs for different goods and services, and then by using that information we can also fill in information and collect and manage the big picture, so that we are then well prepared for proceeding into draft and project phases. But let's start from the proposal in the beginning. I have here created some let's say pre-filled information into these different stages. And for example, if we look at the translation services here, and let's have a view on the translation services. So we basically have the proposal details filled into this proposal phase. So somebody has, for example, suggested that we would need translation services, and who has been in charge of that, or who's in charge of this overall management of the proposer's name, and then what has been suggested. So here we have three different types of services related to translation services, and this proposal really has been collected, sent by somebody, collected, and then person who's in charge of these proposals can either approve it and proceed to the draft phase, or he or she can reject the proposals. So then, of course, naturally, it won't cause any further actions. This approval phase is not mandatory to be done. You can define that within the service, but if we go through that approval phase, then of course the person who actually approves it, then that proposal then proceeds into draft phase, and by doing that, we can then start to create the forthcoming project based on this draft information. And if I next go to the draft page, I take the same translation services example here, look at the information what we have here. Basically, in the draft phase, we have been able to add few elements into the original proposal. So basic details are of course exactly the same. We have the suggested products and services, but then on top of that we have now given some added information like estimated value and the target schedule for that particular service need. And now when we are talking about the draft and the schedule, this target schedule here is now also visible in the front page about the translation services, which is from during this autumn time frame this year. So proposals are not visible here in the front page. Drafts and projects will be, and as said, you can filter then the views based on these filtering criteria. So let's go back to these translation services draft, and now the same procedure can be happening here at this point as well than in the previous stage, that we can approve this draft, get it further into project mode, or it can be terminated already at this point if we somehow realize that okay, there is no actual need for proceeding to project phase. So all these possible actions all these actions are possible during the shift phase from draft to project. Then if we go to the project mode, which means that now we are ready to start and schedule the forthcoming tendering. And let's open again this translation services. It's possible that, or we can now look at the tendering project here. Basically, same information is available than was in the draft phase, but then on top of that, we have been able to add different kind of schedules or the schedule for this project. How do we want to proceed? And we have created certain project steps here, like preparation of the call for tenders, contract draft, call for tenders, commenting, publication of the call for tenders, etc., etc. And this scheduling part is actually quite important, and let's say one of the most important things when thinking about this planning, how to use that in practice, because we can actually create those schedules by ourselves into the system. By going into schedule profile, we are able to define different kind of schedules for different kind of tendering projects. For example, here I have profiles for service tenderings, profile for goods tenderings, and if, for example, I take the service tenderings schedule here, go into the edit mode, as you can see, I have set here different kind of stages and given them some timelines, that how long does it take to me to prepare and finalize these steps. And basically I can add, delete, change the order for these schedules as much as I want. And then when I have the schedule in place, that I now know that okay, all these schedule phases and the timings are correct for me to do the actual tendering project, I can then go and create the project based on the preset schedules. And if I now create a new tendering project, I don't go through the proposal draft project mode. I go and create directly a project here. I can give a name for the project, certain description, and then I just take here the procurement procedure. Let's do like an open procedure. Let's take the service procurement category, and then based on that I can create the project, which is now have been created. I go into browse mode and take this project which I just created, which is in progress mode now. I go and edit the project, and now I can pick those preset schedules and define the actual project and scheduling based on the preset schedule. I go into the schedule mode. I select the schedule profile which I had been creating earlier, and now let's take this profile for service tenderings. I select that and replace any previous schedule targets I had here, and then I based on these preset schedules, I can now set what is my ultimate target for finalizing this whole procurement process. Like in this case, what is the date when I need to have the procurement contract in place. And if I now pick, for example, an imaginary date, 1st of October, that's my target for finalizing this project, I can now import the schedules from this preset schedule profile and replace all earlier schedules with these new timings, and it automatically calculates me that what is the first time or what is the date for me to start the preparing for call for tender based on that preset schedule timings. So if I start this preparation by the end of July, that will mean that if I follow the target schedule, I'm then able to finalize the whole thing by the 1st of October. And of course, if I now need or realize that some of these schedules may not be realistic, for example, due to summer holidays, I may have some delays of the certain targets. For example, answering the questions may not happen by 3rd of September. I can now put the timing like 2 weeks ahead, so it will be 17th of September. The system automatically asks me that do I want to shift the dates of these other steps, either the following stages, yes, next stages, or for the previous stages, or yes, both. I will now say that okay, I want to postpone the coming stages, so yes to next stages, which automatically shifts the dates according to my preset schedule, so that by this 2 weeks delay also my ultimate final, let's say finalizing day will now move 2 weeks ahead until 15th of October. So that's how the scheduling works. And now when I have done the schedule for the project, and if I have the Cloudia sourcing in use, which is a tool for doing the actual procurement process, then I can copy or actually move this information to Cloudia sourcing, where I have already this information coming from the Cloudia planning part. I know what is the service I'm going to procure, when are these target steps going to happen, etc., etc. That information can be copied to Cloudia sourcing, and then we can start the procurement process or the project based on this information in Cloudia sourcing.